I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to the Corporate and Community Services Standing Meeting, this November 4th, 2019. Welcome to Movember. Hopefully people are growing mustaches. Stephen, Mr. Hull's already there. I love it. Today we acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We are thankful to share in the special spirit of this place, rich in energy of Mother Earth, our ancestors, and the love of all creation. Can I get a mover and seconder for the adoption of the agenda? Moved by Councillor Berman, seconded by Councillor MacLeod, that the content of the Corporate Community Services Standing Committee agenda for November 4th be adopted as presented. All in favor? Passed. Is there any business arising from the previous meetings? Seeing none, any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Okay, we have a deputation, but unfortunately the wonderful people from Georgian Bay Forever are stuck on the 400. So we are just going to skip ahead of that until they get here, and then we will also be foregoing a report later. We're going to kind of wait so it goes hand in hand. So moving on, reports and minutes of other committees and boards. That the Corporate and Community Service Standing Committee receive and refer the following committee and board minutes, including recommendations contained therein, to the next regular meeting of Council. 6.1, Collingwood Downtown BI Board of Management minutes, October 10th, 2019. 6.2, Museum Advisory Committee minutes, October 17th, 2019, and the 24th, 2019. And 6.3, the Trails Advisory Committee minutes, October 9th, 2019. Can I get a move and seconder? Moved by Councillor Berman, seconded by Councillor MacLeod. Any questions or comments? Are you cold, Councillor Cooley? Thank you very much for being a crossing guard today. And today wasn't a bad day though. It was like plus 11, felt like 8. Today was all right with the rain, but thanks for doing that. Okay. So hopefully, if anybody's watching at home and wondering why Councillor Comey is clutching I'm assuming a very hot water bottle, thank you very much for doing that. Sorry.
I just wanted to make the standing meeting clear that there is a recommendation in the museum minutes to approve their museum strategic plan. This is required for them to be able to apply for certain funding for the programming that they do over at the museum.
Oh, I like that. So do we have one prepared, or should I? I just didn't read it. Okay. Thank you. It is that the October 20th, 2019 minute meetings that the council approved the museum strategic plan as presented. Can I get a mover and second? Moved by Councillor Comey, seconded by Councillor Berman. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Fantastic for them to get their funding. Okay, so now we're going to jump ahead to 7.2. Seeing an affirmative nod. 7.2, the Harborview Park Water Park Play presentation. Director Culver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. See if I can make this work. No, I think the battery died. Yeah, I can't even use the pointer, which I was hoping to do, but okay. Excuse me. So there's some maps in this that are going to be a little bit difficult, but I'll have to try and use numbers and locations to help you see your way through. But essentially what this is we're bringing you up to speed with the development of what is kind of commonly known as a splash pad. We like to use the word water play area for what it is we're presenting. It to be located at Harborview Park. And what you're looking at is sort of the project objectives as they were laid out at the beginning. to develop a water play space that allows for a large volume of users, to make sure we have adequate parking and traffic flow. And in doing that, we're trying to consider not just what the splash pad will be attracting, but also lots of future uses in the park as well. We need to make it complementary to the Awen gathering place in both the aesthetic and the intention. Some of the symbolism around the Awen gathering place speaks to the stewardship of the land and the indigenous presence and how they looked after things. So we wanted to make sure we weren't conflicting in our messaging. So we are going to be using natural materials and then theming that's somewhat complementary to that. We also want to make sure that in line with that stewardship that we're being as efficient as we can in the use of water. So the system that will be used on the pad will be a recycling system. In other words, the water doesn't immediately go to sewer, it goes in and is repurposed again in the splash pad using filtration. And where we do have to discharge, there's a couple of times when you'll have to discharge some of the water, and that'll be used for grey water irrigation as much as possible. And we also know that we needed to include a washroom and a change room facility based on there being a lack of those kinds of facilities along our trail system. This actually is a little bit of a rehash of some activity you're already aware of, but we did do a pre-consultation with the development committee. They gave us some clear direction and prescription for what needed to be accomplished, which we accomplished in large part with Burnside Engineering. As everybody I think is aware, Harborview Park at one point in its history was a landfill, so we had to do a landfill study, environmental impact study. We had to do a floodplain analysis because it is in the watershed. We also, from there we did a site plan, and that's basically what I'm going to be showing you tonight. And we also, along the way of doing the site plan, we had to rationalize a lot of components that were indicated in the waterfront master plan because new information, causes us to take these concepts and have to adapt. So just before we go to the next slide, upcoming, we'll be doing a First Nations consultation to essentially create a synergy between the gathering circle and the splash pad, water play area. We'll be doing a final design and a public open house to reveal that design. We're working on the development of the tender. There'll be the approval of the 2020 budget by council in order to get the funding to complete the project, and then we'll move straight to construction with this award of a successful tender. The next slide. So I mentioned about some waterfront master plan adaptations, and there's some mapping coming up that'll help you to understand some of these things a little better. But there was a skate trail initially conceptualized, and people may remember it being sort of subtly a figure eight kind of looking trail on the park. And the water play or splash pad area was sort of cusping around the north end. And like I said, you're going to see a map that sort of is drawn straight from the waterfront master plan. So things that we did after, in addition to the site constraints that, I'll talk about in a second, which talk about, where flooding might occur, what the D4, the landfill parameters are that we can't interfere with, and a few other things. It made it impossible to do it for that, but there's also a struggle with building an ice surface in the open air anyway. The outdoor rink behind the Curling Club is a good example of that. We get 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 10 if we're lucky, out of real good solid ice, and the rest of the time we struggle. And so it's a tough one when you're in the open and there's sunlight and different weather effects. It's very difficult to kind of create that. We also had an issue reconciling the energy consumption that would be involved and the environmental considerations of that. So in order to make a synthetic trail, which would be really the only way we could guarantee that it was successful, is, and even then, like I say, there are challenges. We basically are taking the surface area of a hockey rink and stretching it out over a third of a kilometer, so about 333 meters roughly. And in a hockey rink, you push glycol into a manifold, or sorry, the freezing solution into a manifold, and it runs this pattern under the ice. Taking that and stretching it around a loop is going to require a lot of energy. Again, there's a significant amount of engineering involved in that. And so we basically started to think, I'm not sure that this is a really good idea. Then we get to the site constraints, and the site constraints sort of, capped it off and said that this is really not going to be a good idea for this site. So Unfortunately, we're abandoning the skate trail from the waterfront master plan, but I'll come back to a possibility of another idea that we're looking at. The paddling center, again, I'll tell you in a second when you see the map, you'll understand, but we had to move the heritage the culture / paddling center building back on the property, and in doing that, we pushed ourselves away from the water, which doesn't make for an ideal paddler situation, having to lug your boats from a long way away. So what we've had to do is say, let's separate the paddler piece of that, and we're looking at the end of Birch Street. There's a piece of green space at the end of what the rugby club is using now for a field. We've had some very, very, very early conversations with the paddlers about that, and have a lot more conversation to have in order to make sure it's feasible and acceptable and kind of move into that. But that's sort of the rough idea at this point. And then the space that's remaining is sort of how we're seeing the building shift back to the south. So in the south side of the park, and again, I'm showing you a map. So this is a place where potentially we could in the future retain the cultural building, the cultural aspect that was intended there. So again, we're still working within the realm of the waterfront master plan, but we've had to make some space adjustments and some use adjustments. So if you move to the next one, you'll see the waterfront master plan as it was originally conceptualized. North is to your right, in case there's any confusion. The red building is what I mentioned before. That was this combined culture and paddling space. So the paddlers would be able to sort of store boats there, have some space to assemble, and then be able to get out to the docks and launch and do what they do on the water. You can see the skate trail in that sort of roughly figure 8 looking shape. And you can see how it kind of wraps around the gathering circle and cuts pretty close to what is the east end of the park. So if you move to the next one, this is really hard to see, and I apologize. This is straight from our documents, but the constraints on the site, you can see where things like the landfill restrictions are, that we can't work with certain spaces because the studies tell us that we have to leave them available. We also have some environmental buffers, and we have some flood buffers as well. So after a pretty comprehensive, I wouldn't say pretty, very comprehensive study period this summer, we're left with pretty significant constraints on the site. So if you move to the next slide, you can sort of see how we're trying to resolve this. So number 3 on this site is that future building potential for somewhere down the road. Again, should we wish to in the future include a culture space, that's sort of identified as where it might be. You can see that we're set back from a lot of those constraint barriers, flood barriers, etc. And number 7 is where you'll see the splash pad coming to rest. You'll also see some parking solutions put into this site, which we contemplate being phased in, not all at once, but allowing for substantial traffic and parking. So if you move to the next one, this is focusing in on the water play concept. So the water play itself is set up into sort of 3 nodes. Each of them would have sort of an attraction to a different age group. You can see sort of a water, number 4 there, you can see a sort of a waterfall starting point. And then you can see the water sort of tracing its way down through these pads to number 7. Number 1 is the washroom building, which will also contain the water pump house and recycling system. And number 2 is the change room. It'll be an exterior change space, not inside, but similar to the Toronto Zoo, where you're fenced and surrounded, and there's some zigzags to get into it, enable privacy, but it'll be an outdoor change space. Surrounding it, you'll see some of the ideas that we're working with to generate a design. Lots of use of natural materials, rocks, plantings, some wood. The idea being that we're trying to make it so that it feels as natural as possible, while still providing all of the play opportunities for the young people. I think that was the last one. So So generally speaking, that's the update. The significant message I think that I'm delivering today is that people, I think, will hopefully understand that a waterfront master plan is set up to be a concept. Some work goes into trying to plot and plan things and put things into place, but it's not as intensive as what we had to take on this summer. So after we've done that work, you realize that there are boundaries we can't cross, and so things have to be kind of shifted and juggled, and in this case, in one case, eliminated. I will say that we are looking at that unit. Adam, if I can get you to go back one slide. Space number, I can't see, space number 9, the green space that's in between where the future building might be and the splash pad. The idea being that if we can make it work, and there's still a lot of discussion to be about whether or not it's a good idea and whether we can make it work, we might try to put a natural ice rink in there, which means that, again, you're limited in time. It's all dependent upon weather. But if we put a heat trace water source in and some opportunity, we may be able to do a natural and get back and provide for that skating expectation that was a part of the waterfront master plan. But again, it wouldn't be energy consumptive. It would be definitely dependent upon the environment, and like I say, it's sort of an early concept that we're still working out the feasibility of. That's my presentation on this. Happy to take questions.
It's a pretty good presentation. Before we get to the questions from the public, I forgot to mention the man to the right of me, our deputy mayor, is here tonight filling the seat of the mayor as he is on his way to Japan. So thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Hall, for being here, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on anything. Was there anyone from the public who would have any questions on this wonderful report? Please come on up. Please and thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Nice presentation. My name is John McGarry.
Mr. McGarry, just for the people at home, just come over to the mic.
Okay.
Please and thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Nice presentation. And my question is concerning item number 3 on the chart, the Alwyn Cultural Center. I may have missed that in earlier, discussions with Brooks McElroy and so on. So I wonder if you could fill us in a bit more on that.
So thank you for the opportunity to respond to that. So the cultural center is really just an extrapolation of what was sort of the boathouse concept. It was always contemplated that, from Brooks McElroy's work, that the boathouse would have a cultural interpretation component to it that would marry up with the gathering circle. So there would be an idea of providing some dialogue, some information that married the two sites together. So again, there's no permanence to this in the plan. It's really just our best effort to try and hang on to one piece of what was indicated in the waterfront master plan, even as we extract out the paddler location and put it into a more appropriate location. So it's not, it literally is an opportunity space. It's, like I say, we're only indicating it as a culture space because it sort of keeps in line with something that was indicated in the waterfront master plan. But it's not a for sure by a long shot.
Mr. McGarry, any follow-up to that? Or wonderful, thank you. Any other questions from, please come on up, introduce yourself, sir. Welcome.
My name is George Powell. I live at 1 Niagara Street, where you have a significant mess we're going to have to clean up, which is all the storm damage we've had there. And I appreciate you've got some other plans, but that's something that has to be budgeted and hasn't been budgeted, I expect, at this time. So there's major issues there. But the issue that I have, my training is an engineer, and I practiced sanitary engineering for almost 50 years. One of the concerns I have is the location of the sewage plant there, the wastewater treatment facility. It's really important that the town has a program to monitor the water quality because people are using that, and the more we draw people to that park, which I strongly encourage, because it would take the heat off Sunset Point, which is really at capacity now. I think it's very important that you have a program that can demonstrate to people that there are no issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Come on back up. I even gave you a chance for a follow-up.
Further question, and after George's comment about, Sunset Point Park being at or above capacity. Is there any thought or any way to enlarge access to the water or a larger beach or simulate a beach as part of this program in Harborview Park to take some people away from Sunset Point?
What I'm saying? I know what you're saying, yeah. So through you,
Director
Chair.
Culver.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I mean, that's a very big, huge question. And I'm scratching my brain going back to the waterfront master planning process where a lot of ideas were discussed, and I believe, like I say, I hope that, I want to make sure that I'm very careful in what I say because I'm not trying to commit us to, reverse engineering the waterfront master plan, but I believe that there was NBCA restrictions that would have not allowed us to affect the shoreline there, if I recall correctly. But again, I think that's something I have to go back and research the waterfront master plan and even have a conversation with the NBCA to make sure. But it is a somewhat sensitive area given, the natural vegetation there. So that's the best answer I can give today, but I can do more work on that.
Don't do anything, the beavers are opening it up for you.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Any more questions from the public?
Just
Mr. Powell, come on back up.
the question to you, and to Park as well. I think one of the solutions is to try to promote the use of the hens and chickens area. If any of you have been out there, I don't know if you have, but if you've gone out there, there is beach there. And it is a good looking beach, and it's not sitting in the harbor, it's not confined by wastewater discharges and things like that, which is a concern. And I think that that's an area that would help to offload the problems we have at Sunset Point.
Excellent, thank you very much. I can appreciate your comments very much, but I would like just if the questions could just be about the Harborview Park water play for Mr. Culver on this particular one. Any other questions from the audience? Seeing none. Councillor McLeod?
Oh, I have a lot. Thank you for the presentation, Director Culver, and I know that we're going to be hearing an awful lot from you in the course of this meeting. I have some fishermen's friends if you'd like to borrow them after a little while. Would you mind, through you, Mr. Chair, would you mind just walking me through a little bit of what it is that you found or that was found during some of the studies? When you talk about that the landfill study and the floodplain study and the environmental assessment precludes doing what it is that was envisioned within the waterfront master plan. What is it that was found under there that precludes that development being, like, is it carpet? Is it glass? What is it under there?
So I'm actually noticing that Dave Wood is in the office of Land State Air Protect and actually has been the one managing a lot of these constraints. I think I might call him up to ask about what constitutes the constraint barriers. In terms of what's found, I can tell you that from the gathering circle builders, we found, because we had to drill pylons into it, and there was automotive hose, carpet, glass. Those were the big features in there. I think, Dave, do you mind helping out with the constraints and what constitutes a constraint and why they exist?
Mr. Wood, welcome. Just introduce yourself for the people at home who are streaming.
Yeah, I'm David Wood. I'm with Envision Tatham. We're the landscape architectural firm working on the site planning design. So we didn't prepare the constraints mapping study. That was through RJ Burnside and Associates, but I can certainly interpret it on their behalf. So there are a number of environmental constraints. Most notable one being the landfill. There is buried glass, rubber hose, I believe, is in there. Carpet. There's nothing considered hazardous to park use. The site was successfully closed, and there's documentation on that. But there are recommended regulations for buffering against where the edges of the landfill are. So in the mapping there, those pink lines kind of represent a 20 to 30 meter offset from that the approximate edge of the fill. And my understanding of that, and this is not my area of expertise, but there is potential for some soil leachate that can kind of encroach. So it's not a great idea to put buildings and other kind of large excavation components in those areas. So it's all manageable. We are awfully close to those limits, encroaching on the 30-meter one for sure. And I think there's ways that you can mitigate those requirements. But as Dean had indicated earlier, the building itself at the moment is just a placeholder at 10,000 square feet, and it's subject to actual architectural design. So I'm sure that with those constraints, the architect can kind of work on that in the future. The other environmental constraints, particularly given the environmental protection areas, are there's some vegetative buffer requirements from the drainage courses to kind of provide that riparian zone. There's also flooding limits as well. So there's like a high risk and medium risk flooding boundaries that also kind of dot the map as well. And the yellow represents sort of the medium risk. So we've had to put everything out of that, obviously. And what's been happening recently is a good lesson as to why we do that. So the areas left over, once you sort of put all those constraints on top of each other and start looking at how to arrange the site based on the good land, that's kind of how we arrived at the recommended site concept. Not sure if that answers the question, but.
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
as a follow-up. And so, just to clarify it for lay people like me and whoever else is also confused, you can't build stuff on top of the landfill, even if it's just a slab that you're going up, because of why?
And having seen it, it is there is no structural bearing capacity to what's there. It's variable. When we did the gathering circle and we had found that structure, the structural engineers basically could not give it a value. It was given a zero value. It might as well have been on popcorn. So they just we had to find that on steel piles that went down to bedrock to make sure that over time it didn't start sinking or listing.
Okay, so it's unstable.
It's
is
very
the answer.
unstable, yeah.
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
That was the answer that I was wondering about. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have several more, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. When you talk about the skate trail and how it's been completely taken right off the table, what sorts of research was done with other municipalities regarding their skate trails? I know that Blue Mountains, for example, there's a resort near us that has a skate trail through its woods, and I've skated on a skate trail in Richmond Hill, which is about 9 feet wide, I think, and on concrete in a sunny neighborhood. Tell me why ours was rejected.
I think it's, so we had done research. The Blue Mountain Trail, for example, is underneath shade. Like it's a couple of degrees cooler at the top of the mountain, which gives it a little bit more consistency and a little more certainty. Plus it's under shade, established shade, which allows for it to be frozen a lot. It's not to say that in certain times of the winter they haven't had challenges as well. And I'm sure they'll tell you about those if you ask. Yeah, definitely it is possible to engineer a synthetic ice surface, but I think that's where we talk about sort of, what is the capacity for carrying a huge operating cost? What is the environmental impacts that we're generating in a site that sort of celebrates environmental stewardship? A lot of these things that came into play as we it wasn't like one thing sort of cleaned it off. It was a lot of things with the final sort of, stake in the heart being the site constraints. But we went through a lot of research. We did look at other sites that had successful, there's weather change, there's weather differences for us, relative like water, the temperature next to the water versus the temperature in land. There's a lot of things, wind effects, that we kind of looked at this and we weren't sure that it wasn't going to be a very, very difficult enterprise to begin with, take into account the energy, take into account the environmental effects, and so on. And then finally, like I say, the site constraints caused us to have to take another look at how the site can be arranged.
Thank you. Just one more, Mr. Chair, I think, actually.
That's not several,
I
then.
know.
That's just one more. All right.
Okay, I lied. There's two more. Would you mind awfully just walking me through one more time, Director Culver, the slide that we saw earlier that shows the names of the streets through which we will access this site? I think it's number 3.
You'll have to go forward to the, no, back the other way. And then another one, and another one, there.
There we go. So are we suggesting that we will access this site through Cedar Street, or are we going to access the site through Oak Street, more likely?
As the plan sits now, it's for both. So both would remain as they are, and both would feed the parking lot, and the traffic flow would be able to move from Cedar to Oak through the parking lot. But in effect, we're kind of changing the nature of that street, this stub end at the end of Cedar and Oak, and turning it into a parking facility. More of a parking facility than it currently is.
Would you mind awfully as just to walk me through what number 1, 2, and 3? I'm having a lot of difficulty
Yeah,
seeing
no
it.
problem. Yeah, sorry for that. So number 1 is the existing parking area. That's municipally owned. It's behind Tim Hortons and adjacent to McDonald's parking lot. Number 2, it would be an expansion of the parking lot into the park, taking the current trail out of service and moving it into that arc shape that you see wrapping around by the green space. Number 3 is the future building, which could be culture if that theme stayed, or not, or something else completely. Number 4 is if we had a building that was that size, a drop-off area would be desirable. So that would be for buses, it could be for people with accessible needs, whatever. Number 5 is basically the building service lot. So this would be able to sort of adjacent building space, adjacent building parking. Number 6 is a contemplated patio area. Number 7 is the splash pad or water play feature. Number 8 is the washroom building with the attached change facility. Number 9, I have to find, is the green space, where we may, if we're figured out, would be potentially a skate pond of some kind. But if not, it just maintains the greenery of the park. And in the summer, that's would be the case in every case. You can't grow ice in the summer. Number 10 is the existing gathering circle. The 11 is the existing outer circle of the gathering space.
Thank you.
So you have one more, because
Yeah.
that was 2.
I'm-
And there's probably other questions that would like to be asked.
That's
So
fine.
no, go ahead. If you have one left, that's fine.
The rugby field that is currently in use not too distant from this is not being touched.
No, we don't have in either the waterfront master plan or any of our current plans. There's no intention to adjust that field or change that field. Rugby's invested in it, and we're happy to support them there. They've done a great job of making it work. The field that is to the south of the gathering circle now it has always been planned to come out of play. It's still in use now, or had been this summer, but it ultimately will be taken out.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Colby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Director Culver, great presentation. I think I certainly don't need to tell you, if I had to guess, probably a lot of our residents anticipate the water play area, maybe more than any of the other projects that are pending, you know. Which brings 2 questions to mind on your sort of timeline under pending, construction pending. So what is the timeline on the horizon for this?
So I've had this conversation frequently, I think, since the beginning of this year. It's a very, very tough thing to figure out how you're going to, like, in terms of what month will something happen in. I will say that when we started this, we didn't know or understand the length of study that would have to be undertaken on this site, and so that obviously set us back to some extent. But it's all good, like it's all going to lead us to a proper facility. So with that in mind, so if you go back to, Adam, if you back up to the slide that shows the times, I think it's 2 or 3 slides back. One more, please. Yeah, so pending just means that it's in progress, it's planned to be done, but it's not done yet. So we want to move to a First Nations consultation. I've reached out to an Indigenous elder to help us with this, and we're hoping to have that completed in the next few weeks. We look to get to a final design following that consultation, in which case then we'll be holding an open house to sort of showcase what the finished design looks like with appropriate renderings. You know, could that be early December? It could be. But I hate to sort of start putting numbers and dates on things. Definitely throughout this, we have to work on and have been working on the development of a tender document so that by the time council approves the budget, we're ready to launch immediately. And subject to budget approval, we'll go out to the market, get a contractor on board. The contractor has to fit us into their schedule, which causes, you know, who knows, I don't know. But again, we're still targeting the spring to try and get started as soon as possible.
I think that's very good news. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, one more, please,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. So the concept, so when we hear final design, does that mean those images we saw are part of the preliminary design? Because my assumption is these images are going to make their way to the public. Is this what they can anticipate? It looks absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, so if you go to the final slide, this one. So these are basically representative images that sort of indicate how we're going to move forward in the design, but we haven't actually plotted out the water play, like where the jets are going to go. You know, and we're working with an expert to try and create that design so that we know, you know, we can contemplate a water play feature. Like, I don't have the expertise to tell you how that's going to happen, so we're working with experts that are going to help us to do that. Plus, they're going to tell us what can work where and be safe for children and create the effects that they enjoy. So that's all sort of the design. So the final image will actually sort of tell you where jets might occur, and you'll actually see where some of the landscape pieces are placed so that you have a good idea of what to expect when it's finally built. What you're seeing right now is essentially the maps that shows you sort of the open spaces that will be filled with features.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're very welcome. Great questions. Any other questions from the committee? Deputy Mayor?
Maybe two comments, if I may.
Yes.
The one is that I don't have any issue if you were to scrap the entire ICE program. When you look at other communities, and when you look at the project that's up on top of the escarpment for Blue Mountain Resort, which is a for-profit park, and the number of days that they actually operate, and the cost that it costs them to operate it, and the recovery. I mean, they're essentially operating it as a lost leader for the guests of the village, not the resort as a whole. So that concept, you know, if that had to be removed from your portfolio, period, I don't have a problem with that. I know that we tried a number of years ago with the community outdoor park rinks, and you know, if it wasn't for the countless volunteers within those various neighborhoods, that never would have gotten off the ground. But as we inevitably have to deal with the changes in climate, it just is becoming more increasingly difficult to operate. And I just know that your portfolio is so wide and so deep that it's just, quite frankly, for me, it's not a priority. And that's for coming from somebody who loves to skate and has got two younger ones that love to skate as well. The other is that, and it is a question, maybe not a comment, given what did happen last week and what's happened in communities like Port Dover last week in terms of water encroaching on their main street and Wasaga Beach to the east, has there been any pause in terms of, you know, what we could maybe see sort of a year, 5 years, 10 years from now as it relates to water levels? And I'm thinking more the two streams that are both on the east and the west. I quite frankly, I don't know if others, but I've never seen them as high as they were this past spring. And then what was surprising is that they never lowered. And in fact, you know, encroached. It was significant, the depth in which they encroached. And is that a concern? And how would that play at all within what you're proposing?
That last one's a big question. It has...
Sorry, through the chair.
Yeah.
In fairness, it's a pretty loaded question, so if you wanted time to
Yeah.
think about it and come back, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I think I can comfortably, through you, Chair, I think I can comfortably answer what is being considered. There was a floodplain analysis, and there is I think it's a 178 contour that is sort of the current high water mark. I think it's a 100-year high water mark or something like that. So it's so those constraints were kind of understood, and that's one of the reasons why things had to shift around, because we have to understand that in the worst case scenario, water could penetrate the site, and where might it go? Having said that, the loaded part of that question comes with what's happened at Sunset Point, you know, what we're experiencing on Millennium Drive, or Millennium, not Millennium, Millennium Park and Heritage Drive. And I'm not a betting guy, and I don't know if the water's gonna go up or down. I don't know that anybody truly does, although there is some indications it started to drop. But, you know, I don't know that the world's been what it is today. So I think your question not only impacts this site and this project and this plan, is sort of a community-wide consideration. Like, so, how do we reconcile what could happen in the future? And I don't know. This is a result of a year of work, or almost a year of work of bringing us to this point. I don't know what the future might hold, and what we did know that we've been responsible in terms of managing what we're told is the flood potential. If that answers, or maybe into some part of it.
It does, thank you. And as I said, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I appreciate your thoughts. Just a comment, a positive comment would be, it does speak to the strength of the harbor and how protected it is, that given what happened at Sunset Point and Millennium on the east side, and then further going east, we didn't see any erosion, or I didn't anyways last week, when walking around this particular area. So it speaks to the inner harbor anyways. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Very welcome, good comments. Any other questions before? All right, I think this is a fantastic thing. I think we all do. I speak for everybody on this one. Just another way to animate our fantastically, which I've always considered as a born and raised guy here, underused waterfront. So thanks for putting this together and spending the year to get all the questions and answers to those questions. You had mentioned the adequate parking in the parking lot. So I was just wondering, I'm a bit of a numbers guy, how many new parking spots will be created? Because this is such a beautiful concept, and that water play feature will be highly sought after within our community. And even though we are a active transportation community, this is going to be packed. So,
Yeah, so thanks for that question.
which
It's a significant expansion on the parking lot. I don't know, do you have the number, Dave, off the top of your head? No. So, we live and die by numbers, so I can get you the number.
Excellent.
I can get you the number, and I don't want to necessarily say a number that is wrong. But we'll say that there was significant parking expansion contemplated for the exact reason that you described. I'll also say that, you know, as George mentioned, Sunset Point at its maximum largely has to do with parking constraints. So we wanted to do everything we could reasonably to avoid that. We also would like to set this up as a real active transportation hub. It's got really good trails connecting through it. So making sure that we have all the destination amenities, bike racks and water stations and things like that, you know, get people on bikes and on foot getting to the site that way versus via car. But we've tried not to underestimate what the potential parking issues might be, so we don't end up with the same kind of problems we have elsewhere.
excellent. Well, that was my only concern, and it does look like a lot. I can't see.
I can get you a number, but I just don't want to say
That's
one
fine.
now.
So I'm going to ask on behalf of the committee if you could send this to us, because I know that I wasn't the only one kind of squinting my eyes to see where it was, and thank you for Mr. Ferguson for circling it with the mouse.
Yeah.
That was great because it kind of kept us all along, so thank you very much, sir.
If I could also say though, the number I'll send you would be the parking lot in full. We do anticipate phasing the parking lot in, so in the early days, we probably won't have all the parking lot that would be there at the end of the project, like in a future phase as well. We're trying to get the splash pad built and
Yes,
accommodate
yes.
that, but we don't necessarily, we may not, it's a little bit early, but we may not be able to get all of the parking in the first run. We might have to come back later and finish up the parking design.
Okay, yeah, as long as I think, as long as we know the steps of where it started from and where it's going to go and how many more people we can anticipate. You had mentioned that was a town-owned parking lot, so municipally owned. So is that paid parking or is that?
No, it's free parking right now.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
No problem. I can stay up here for the other.
No, because we have the wonderful people here from Georgian Bay Forever, so I'm gonna give you a bit of a break.
Yeah.
And we're just gonna go back, in time for the people following the agenda. We're gonna go back to the deputation, 5.1, Georgian Bay Forever, regarding the potential project focus on preserving the health of Georgian Bay. Mr. David Sweeten is here, welcome. Hopefully the drive up wasn't too bad. How long did it take you extra to get here?
About 25 minutes. They had the 400 northbound blocked, all lanes. There was debris across the highway, so
They were
trying to
saying,
keep me away from coming and talking to you.
well, I'm glad you made it, and hopefully,
Thank you for-
I'm glad you made it up here safe.
Thank you very much for reorganizing the agenda to
Oh,
accommodate.
no, this is too important. So, just try to fit within about 10 minutes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. My name is David Sweetenham. I'm the Executive Director of Georgian Bay Forever. We're here today to talk to you about a project that we've started initially in Perry Sound. The Georgian Bay Forever itself is a registered Canadian charity. We started in 1995, and our focus is solely on water quality. So everybody's starting to hear stories in the media over the last year and a half about plastic waste and microfibers and all of these things getting into our water. And we often describe Georgian Bay as a pristine water body, and we kind of point to the lakes downstream of us and kind of poo-poo the water quality in Lake Ontario, but really when you actually start getting into the waters of Georgian Bay and critically looking at them, there are more microfibers in the Great Lakes right now than there are in the Pacific Ocean gyre. And we've all heard about the Pacific Ocean and the plastic waste that's there. But if you actually measure the particles per square kilometer, in Georgian Bay, we have more, or in the Great Lakes, we have more plastic in the bay. So we thought we better start looking at this now as people that live in the bay and as a charity that works in the bay. The sooner we can get ahead of these problems and start to understand them, the better. So we started a project in Perry Sound working with the University of Toronto and one of the world leading experts in microfibers, Chelsea Rockman, and you might have heard of her interviewed many times on CBC and different media outlets. Her work was really starting to look at how many microfibers exist in the Great Lakes, how many microfibers are starting to make their way into fish and even the human streams. So we are starting to ingest microfibers now because even once you treat the water from the bay, the water coming out of your tap, whether you're anywhere in the Great Lakes that was surveyed, the municipally treated water actually has microfibers in it. So you're consuming a significant number of, in the millions of pieces, that from a weight perspective, about 5 grams of plastic every year, you're just drinking it in the tap water. So we started to look at how we could keep those fibers out of the water. And one of the ideas that came along was simply putting a filter on washing machines, because our clothing is a significant source of the microfiber contamination that's getting into the water. If you go to use your dryer, you have to clean the lint trap before you do the next drying load. And if you actually see all the fibers that you've captured in that, well, imagine you have no filter whatsoever on your washing machine. And this is one load of fibers, and I could pass it along.
Yes.
That's just one load of 5 white lab coats. So it's a lot of microfibers that are just going right down the waste, through the effluent that comes out of your washing machine, right into the wastewater treatment plant, and then a significant percentage, over 10% in some studies, over 40% in other studies, of those fibers don't get trapped by the wastewater treatment plant because they were not designed to filter out such tiny little fibers. So we've installed 98 households in Perry Sound, which is about 10% of the households connected to the wastewater treatment plant. And we've seen a measurable, statistically significant drop in the amount of microfiber that's leaving the finished polished water of the wastewater treatment plant. So we've started to prove this out scientifically. We're working with the University of Toronto, as I mentioned. They are going to be producing a published scientific study on this. But we thought, since we're already starting to educate the public on this and see some positive benefit, what better opportunity than to come to a much larger community like Collingwood and propose that we do an expansion of this project in this community. So So we also, as part of the project, do cleanups where we go along the shore. Next week, we'll be doing another cleanup in Collingwood. We've done, plastic cleanups. We get the community out, kids and their parents and everybody to start talking about this. There's a significant educational component to the program. Already, we've done about 40,000 square feet of shoreline up in the Perry Sound area, and some in Collingwood too. We have plastics workshops, because this ties into other initiatives that the town is looking at and taking on, single-use plastics and all of those kind of things, top-of-mind issues for folks. So the next step really is in the Perry Sound project. We're looking to recruit another 100 households. That will put us up to 200 households, or about 20% of the population, the household population up there. If you flip to the next slide. These are the kind of prime culprits, and you can see the clothing at the top, the washing cycle, the filter unit that we put in place. And then when you clean that out after about a month, you can see all of the microfibers that have been captured. We're currently collecting all of these from the 100 sites, transporting it down to U of T where they're weighing it and then characterizing all of the different types of plastic fibers that we're seeing. And it all comes from clothing choices that we make today and things that take a while to educate people on doing alternatives on. But I noticed in the United Nations Sustainability Program that you folks are part of, one of the things they're looking at is actually, sustainable fashion. So that's part of it, but also access to clean water, right? Clean drinking water and so on. So there's many programs that plug into your existing initiatives. The next slide. So the proposal that we've got in Collingwood is to try to recruit 500 households. The wastewater treatment plant, we will do the scientific study on, so we will do before measurements, during measurements, and after, to try to, again, scientifically prove that this program can be translated from one community to another. It just helps the science understand that it's not because of a unique feature that might exist at the Perry Sound facilities. We'll be looking at community engagement programs and public education efforts, again through shoreline cleanups, but also we do workshops in the community and also trying to get this into the classroom education. Youth engagement, and then different diversion tactics. The filters are a great one to start with, but also starting to investigate things that we might be able to look at in the future, like sea bins, which are basically like the big pool skimmers that can go down in the harbor area or along the coast. And also things that actually capture effluent going out of the storm sewers themselves. There are traps that you can put on those. And things, because one of the big fibers that we were finding in our cleanups are cigarette butts that people just throw. And then those wash into the storm sewers and float down into the bay directly. And of course they are cellulose acetate, which is a microfiber. Those are designed to filter chemicals out from the smoke that people are not wanting to inhale. And when you throw the cigarette butt into the water, the chemicals that are absorbed onto the surface of those microfibers can also start leaching into the water. There's lots of opportunities to try to look at future technologies and diversion tactics and so on. And the final slide, or second slide. The request of the town, therefore, really what we're asking the town to do is just to endorse the concept and support the project. We'd like to think that this would be an interesting enough project. It is globally unique. That the town would be excited to kind of promote the work that the town would be part of. We do need a little bit of access through town staff at the wastewater treatment site. Typically those are union-run organizations and we can't do the sampling on our own. We would need town staff on a few days to kind of be able to provide their time to us. And then any cost reductions for meetings or public presentations or things like that we could do would be kind of in-kind donations that the town may be able to make with the facilities that are available. And then other collaborative activities, like I said, if we can start doing shoreline cleanups and getting town staff down and talking about it and calling it and promoting it that way, those are the kinds of support that we're asking from the town. We're looking to raise the money for the project. We know it's significant, but we do have a couple of expressions of interest already, and then some other large funding sources that we're going after, like the Ontario Trillium Foundation, Environment Canada's Eco Action Fund, who funded some of the work that we did up in Perry Sound. And we did have kind of an initial private donation that has been indicated as highly likely, but we don't know the size of it yet, so I won't be able to disclose anything about that. And then finally, last slide. Yeah, so that's really the ask from our perspective to the town. In Perry Sound, we didn't ask for any money. Township didn't have to put any money in it, but they were very supportive, as you can imagine, and that's the same kind of thing we're looking at through the town. So thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Answer any questions.
So what I'm gonna suggest, after a quick consultation with the clerk, is if you could please hang around. So we're gonna get the staff report that accompanies this recommendation. If we could get Ms. Skinner just to jump back to 7.1, and then some of the questions could be answered through that report. Thank you very much. I just sit down and enjoy. Director Skinner, would you like to, please and thank you, head up to the podium and CC 2019-02, the microplastics proposal to collaborate with Georgian Bay Forever on microplastics reduction initiative. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. I just want to give you a little bit of context and then a bit about the implications for the town. So context-wise, we heard about this project, really a demonstration at AMO by attendees from the municipality who went to AMO, and subsequently actually invited Georgian Bay Forever, who graciously came down and told us more about this project. Collingwood has had a lot of success, and we hope we'll have more success in thinking about itself as a bit of a water hub, technically a water hub. We're close to water, we're interested in the volumes of water, work with universities, the work, and I think I see at least one of the involved parties here, Mr. Palmer, with the rain grid project that the town has collaborated on as well. So we are very interested in the green projects, and this would be a relatively large partnership that we would be entering. So I'm going to talk about this proposal. You've heard what it is, and the recommendation that I'm going to come to is that Council would write a letter of support to the provincial government for this funding application by Georgian Bay Forever. And for that would be for the microplastics portion of the proposal, and that we would look separately at the sea bins and the storm drain catchers proportions, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And that upon approval of the funding, we would work quite closely with them to coordinate our messaging and how we can collaborate well together. The intent with the microplastics filtration devices, upon some conversation with our Director of Public Works, Director McDonald, was that we could install them concentrating in a couple of areas of town, so that any water testing would really, if it's going to show results, would show results. So the number of devices that the proposal includes is 500 devices throughout the town of Collingwood in one or two concentrated locations, or mostly concentrated in one or two, say, neighborhoods where we can do some sampling. We did go and consult with the staff at the municipality in Perry Sound, and they had very positive things to say about working with Georgian Bay Forever and their other partners, and that they felt it had been a good initiative for their area. And we also talked with Nottawasaga Valley about the priority of various green initiatives we could undertake. The proposal includes having a funded project lead working for Georgian Bay Forever. So the day-to-day work, the interactions with individual homeowners on large part would be done by the funded project, should it be funded, not directly by town staff, although we would of course support communications, etc. Overall, if we want to look at environmental priorities, although we've made great strides in the recent few years, we haven't adopted a specific set of environmental performance measures. Nottawasaga Conservation Authority and the other conservation authorities do watershed health checks or watershed report cards. And the last one for the Blue Mountain sub-watershed, which actually is throughout the geographic town of Collingwood, included some concerns about forest cover, which we'll be able to address through our generous recent donation, and some river water quality. So there are other environmental priorities, but I think we will that we'll need to look at over time. Natural heritage connectivity is another one that we'll want to look at. So depending on where this goes, we know that microplastics are likely an issue. We don't know that for sure. If they are, there will be changes potentially to what we select to wear and or to how we treat it once we're wearing it. So this project could be part of that second piece. If the town does include the C-bins, which are about $25,000 for 3 of them, and or the storm drain catchers, which are $800 each, and we have 700 storm drains, but we would propose only to do 20 under this project. The town would be accountable to pay for these items or to find alternate funding sources ourselves. So in our recommendation to council, while we're quite positive around with Director Culver's input, very positive around having some of these in the harbour, we don't think they need to be married with this project, and we can do them as a separate decision going forward, potentially in the budget. And we've been looking at other funding sources and also thinking about other partners, either commercially within the town. And I even see people like the Blue Mountains Watershed Trust in the audience today who may be interested in environmental initiatives jointly with the town as well, if we look at some priorities that are near to their and our heart. It was mentioned briefly that the effect on the town finances with the recommended decision is no dollars and a commitment of town's time. And this would be complementary to a number of things we've already done: energy conservation and demand management plan, our single-use plastics ban, recycling, composting, and hybrid vehicles from the town, the tree planting, the upcoming urban forest cover study, our climate change emergency declaration, and our seeking of electric vehicle charging stations fundings with Simcoe, which we hope will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone from the public wishes to get up and speak to this? Seeing none. Oh, come on up, Mr. McGarry.
Get the reputation as a serial questioner. Actually, 3 questions. One is through.
Yes, yes.
Is laundry effluent really the biggest source of microplastics? I would have personally, as a lay person, thought it would be disintegrating garbage and plastic bottles and so on coming down. Question number 2, is there any science that talks to the health impact of ingesting microplastics? You know, whatever the quantity was we're taking in our drinking water is my question. And number 3, a little bit off topic, but I wonder if Georgia Bay Forever has any reliable info on the future of water levels, like how long the high level water level is going to stick around at this level, if they have any ideas. Thanks.
I love how you snuck that one in. Please, just even come up and answer those questions if you can.
First task is to remember them all.
Yes. So,
microfibers,
laundry.
Yeah, the source of microfibers, the water source into the bay, the largest source is through the wastewater treatment plant, and laundry is the most significant contributor to that. In the landfill, a lot of the plastic materials that go in and break down, they're managed and they're covered, and if they're properly being dealt with, there's a cap that goes on them all the time. We are not barging our plastic waste out into the middle of the bay and dumping it like they do in other parts of the world. So in our part of the world, yeah, it's the microfibers. Second thing is the health impacts. You're asking a very good question. It's a state-of-the-art science question right now. There's a lot of research going into looking at this. World Health Organization report just came out. Chelsea Rockman, who I mentioned from the University of Toronto, was one of the editors of that report. She was a little disappointed because they said, well, we don't see any health effects. And the reason they don't see any is because there's no studies that have been done to show those health effects at this point. But we do, so those are current state-of-the-art research questions that are underway right now. A lot of the International Association of Great Lakes research papers that are being published are about the potential health impacts on the fish, where we can see teratogenic effects, mutations that happen because the fiber is small when the embryo is developing and it has a huge mechanical, input. But also we do know that a lot of the chemicals that absorb onto the surface of these microfibers are already listed on Chemicals of Mutual Concern of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement and in the many other chemical management legislation that we have in Canada. So a lot of these chemicals, first the microfiber is a mechanical disruptor. Secondly, there are chemicals that are put into the microfiber when you make it to make it stain resistant or fire resistant. We know there's issues around those chemicals. And third, that these fibers act as little sponges. So in the water, they can actually concentrate chemicals that stick to their surface, and then as they get ingested and move their way up the food web, there's potential for amplification, bioamplification. And the third question?
Water levels.
We're high now. The forecast from NOAA is we're going to enter January possibly above a record and continue to be high because we expect, again, a wet spring. The conditions this year are setting up meteorologically very similar to this time a year ago. And we saw big increases of water, so yeah. Good to be concerned about inundation in your designs.
Excellent. Thank you very much for answering those. Any other questions from the public?
Thank you.
Come on up, Mr. Val.
Well, the question I would ask is, our water plant is an ultrafiltration plant. So it removes very, very fine particles, right? I think it's important that we know that if there is a micro problem, can they get into our water system? I don't think they can, but I don't know that for sure, so
Okay.
that's that question. The water levels, according to the IJC, they're supposed to go down eventually. With global warming, when it happens, you get more evaporation, and that's one of the major drivers. So it's my understanding that we're in a high level now, but the thing that bothers me more than anything is the wave action we saw on Halloween. That wave action was the most I've seen since I've been here, and I'm right on the bay. At 2 o'clock in the morning, it actually woke you up. So we had, probably 10-foot waves coming in there on top of the high water level, and that was causing some major issue there. I think it's really important that you people have a proper coastal engineering study done by someone that is experienced in this type of thing, and I understand that Dean has assured me that that's being done. If that's the case, then I guess you've done your due diligence. But my concern on it is essentially that, and I think that the microplastics. I mean, you don't want them. They impact the fish, according to what David said, and that's an important thing in our area. And I think we have to know what's going on there. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions for Georgian Bay Forever? Seeing none, the staff recommendation is that staff report CC 2019-02 be received and a letter of support be provided to the provincial government's Ontario Trillium Foundation for an application in collaboration with Georgian Bay Forever called Divert and Capture. The fight to keep microfibers/plastics out of our water for the microplastics filtration from washing machines, public education, and water testing portions of the work. And further, upon approval of the funding by the Ontario Trillium Foundation, that the town work with Georgian Bay Forever to refine our collaborative supports, such as town communications and other ways we can align activities and goals and provide the applicable town supports outlined in the final pages of the attached request from Georgian Bay Forever with temporary office space or 1 Georgian Bay Forever staff provided on best effort basis when available. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Berman, seconded by Councillor McLeod. Any questions or comments? Councillor McLeod. Well, you didn't look up. You moved your mic over. For people at home, Councillor McLeod looked at me, with a bit of disdain of why did you say my name right away? But I am staring right at Councillor McLeod, and she put one finger up and moved the mic towards her. So I am just facilitating.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Ms. Skinner. I would imagine, have consulted with members of our staff to see that they are all cool with what's being presented with regard to the collaboration, or is that up to us to say, be cool with it?
We did consult, most recently at the last department heads meeting, which would have been all of the directors, the CIO and myself. And with the recommendation that we have here, we are all in support of the proposal.
Thank you. And number 2.
Excellent.
For Ms.
Number 2 of
3.
excellent.
For Ms. Skinner, is there a way that you can find out from our water treatment workers, including Ms. Slim, I think would be the one to whom this question would actually be directed? Are we testing for microfibers coming out of our taps? And could you get us that information at some point in the not too distant future?
I can commit you to get you that information, and I do not have it at my fingertips.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
My third question is for our presenter, whose name has escaped me, I apologize.
David Sweetnam.
Thank you, Mr. Sweetnam. What does one do with the detritus collected in your filter? Do you truck it to the landfill side? What happens?
Yeah, so just like with your dryer lint, you put it in the garbage can, it goes into the solid landfill through the waste process. But it doesn't go down the drain and into the lake. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you for your presentation.
That last question was brilliant. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Comey.
Thank you so much. So I would offer comment to Mr. Sweeten to say that great presentation, and I really like your youth component and the youth education, because I think we all agree that it's going to be in their hands and they're going to be at the root of making change. The second comment would be through you, Mr. Chair, Executive Director Skinner. I'm pleased to see that the C-bins are in there. I understand why they, given the cost, they wouldn't be included in this recommendation. I can appreciate that, but I'll take this opportunity to commend Director Culver. Earlier this summer, I think it was around 7 a.m., photos of the oil slick started coming in, of our paddlers on the water, their early morning training in this oil incident. And so between Director Culver and our fabulous fire department, a good response was put out, but I think it would be ideal to see it come, before council at some point in budget deliberations. I think they're a really interesting device, and it'd be great to learn more about it.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, we are enthusiastically looking at whether they would be a good proposal for council under the budget, and thinking about that technology for situations exactly like that one you just described.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ms. Skinner, the number of drains again that we have within the municipality, did you say it was 800? Is that correct? And how many would be part of this project?
Through you, Chair. Director McDonald informed us that there were about 700, I believe. Okay. It's in the report, 700 or 800. Oh, I think it's 700. And the proposal, were we to pilot the, it's a storm drain catcher under this proposal, was for 20 at $800 each, or 16,000 max total. We do have some technical concerns on how to empty them and whether or not we have a storm drain challenge that we're trying to address, which is why we've taken those, recommended that those go offline for a subsequent decision.
Okay. My apologies, that's where I got the confusion of the 800 versus the 700. So if we could make a note, I would be interested in having a further conversation about that specific topic.
Yes.
And the costing at budget. Not necessarily for 2020, but just looking down for future planning.
For the 16,000, just for clarity, or for the C-bins?
I don't know, for the 700 drains that are in the municipality.
Yes, sir.
Looking at long-term and
Okay.
just having a follow-up conversation to it.
Wonderful.
At budget.
Yes.
And then if I could comment through to Representative Mr. Sweetnam, and that is just on behalf of Mayor Saunderson, who couldn't be here this evening. He appreciates the opportunity, I guess, to have met prior and to have had a demonstration. I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a meeting at the Legion, and there was a demonstration specific to the product that has captured this scientific experiment here to my right. And he's quite excited, and I just wanted to convey on his behalf to see this potentially go forward. This is astounding that this is, as you mentioned, 3 white lab coats, 1 cycle, and it's captured in this. And if I didn't know better, and it's probably tough to pick up on for people at home, but I mean, if I walked in and I looked at this looks like, you know, somebody's grade 4 science experiment, and I would actually think it's a living organism. If you asked me, I'd say that's a living organism. That's not plastic, so that's astounding. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. And maybe a plug. I understand that the experiment and the filter that would be a part of this attached to the washing machine, if somebody wanted to view this, they could view it on the website, which is georgianbayforever.org.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I have a few. Thank you very much for coming up and braving the 400 North. Just so people can get an understanding, what is the money that you'll be raising for the 500 to 600 households in the Collingwood area? What is the cost per household? So people can understand what you're coming up here to do and investing not only your time and your energy and your expertise, but there is money to this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So right now, the first year budget is over 236,000. About 25,000 of that is directly the mechanical filter units. And sorry, that's actually for 100. It costs about $25,000 for 100 units and the installation of those 100 units.
Okay.
So depending on how the money that we try to raise comes in, we may have to stage that. It may not be the first year we do all 500, maybe 200, 200, and 100 over 3 years. That we'll have to kind of take offline and figure out as we get the interest from the funding sources in, how we'll manage that. And then there's a public education component, and we will be hiring somebody from the area to work in Collingwood to be the project manager for this, just as we've hired somebody up in Parry Sound to oversee the project there. Because recruitment of households also takes a lot of time, in some cases door-to-door knocking, and trying to get that out through the local media, who's been very supportive up there, and we anticipate the local media here would be just as supportive too. And then there's the before and after measurements that we would like to do that actually are part of the Ontario Trillium application to show that you're making a change and to show that the society itself is moving in the right direction. So there's kind of surveys done beforehand and afterwards, which end up being more expensive than I thought they would be, but they're important components, I understand, for public dollars and time to be invested in. So it's a significant amount of money, and that's what we'll be undertaking to try to raise.
To get here. So because you're looking at a 5 to 6 times what you're doing up north in Parry Sound.
Yeah.
And at $25,000 per 100 units.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's quite an infrastructure, so thank you very much, and I believe our media down here is probably a little bit nicer than the ones in Parry Sound.
They are.
All right, that fell on deaf ears. Can you give us the weight again, even though that we treat our water, we still digest how much?
It's about 5 grams a year. That's the reported number based on kind of averages on the sampling that was done. 8 different Great Lakes, in the Laurentian Great Lakes, there were 8 different communities that were sampled. And some reports that came out there said that 100% of the municipal wastewater treatment facilities were at the top producing water that contained microfibers. We're also getting microfibers from food sources. Microfibers are spread on farm fields right now and can blow around in the dust. If you see in a room, when the sunlight comes through it, all the dust motes that are floating around. And those particles don't have to be the 5 micron or less size. I was sitting in a restaurant in Barrie, and I won't name the restaurant because it's just not, it's typical of any air that you breathe. But I literally saw this red fiber that was probably about half an inch floating through the air. So there's lots of sources of microfibers that we're getting. The project in Parry Sound, we've actually just added 15 households that we're analyzing the secondary output of the dryer. So we're putting a filter after the dryer itself on the line and then testing how much of the microfibers are still coming out of the house in the dryer vent. And that just blows onto the street and then eventually washes into the water too. So lots of different sources for these.
Wow, well, thank you very much again for coming up, lots of great questions and comments. So we have a mover and a seconder, so all those in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much for coming up tonight. Thank you, Executive Director Skinner, for giving that. 7.3, PRC 2019 Privy River Parkway Median. Director Culver.
Thank you, Chair.
Are you going to come back up?
I can.
Would you like a fisherman's friend from Councillor McLeod? Yes. Yeah. Just wait 2 seconds. Councillor Comey's going to run out and give him. Okay, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the second time we've been here with this particular report. Admittedly, and I kind of indicated it directly in the report, the proper emphasis wasn't on our recommendation being a health and safety effect. So hopefully in this report, I was able to sort of illustrate some of the danger that comes from this somewhat unique median situation. Just to sort of give a sense, so the median at its widest point is 2 meters, and if you take into account the curbs, there's just not a lot of space there. In the report, I included a link to the Davis Drive treatment that's recently been accomplished, and actually I thank Councillor Doherty because she was the one who actually directed me to that as an example. Which allowed us to go and find a document that described how they accomplished what they did. But they're dealing with 5 meter width, so more than twice the width of our Prairie River median. So we're very challenged in terms of trying to ensure the safety of our staff as they're on this road. That we've been going at this for a number of years. Ideally, we remove the hazard altogether to protect staff, but after the last council meeting, and understanding the desire to have some of the softer treatment, we went back to the root cause and we said what we're really trying to do is we're trying to limit the amount of time that staff are put in a risky situation. And if we limit it enough, we can actually choose times of day when staff can be out where there's less volume of traffic and therefore an even lower risk possibility. So that's what this recommendation is. It's simply saying that we're going to curtail the gardens down to approximately 50% or under 50% of their current size, but we're going to distribute them along the median so that that soft effect is still available, still present. Understanding from some of the comments that there were concerns about the permeability of the surface, so that'll maintain some of the permeability. We'll attempt to use some porous concrete for the work platforms in between each garden. Again, our particular environment and the need for sand and salt doesn't have a great reputation when interacting with porous concrete, but we'll do the best we can to sort of make it as porous as possible. But the goal here is to make staff safe while still trying to maintain some balanced aesthetic for the parkway.
Thank you. Anyone from the public wishes to speak to this? Seeing none. The staff recommendation is that staff report PRC 2019-16 be received and council direct staff to develop a design for the Prairie River Parkway mediums that reduces the garden areas of the mediums to a size that can be managed efficiently with less risk to staff by virtue of less time spent in areas of high volume. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor McLeod, seconded by Councillor Berman. Any questions or comments? Councillor McLeod.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Director Culver, thank you for taking another look at an issue that we wanted you to have another look at and coming up with what might be a workable compromise. I appreciate the work that you've put into this.
Thank you.
Those are my comments.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Director Culver. So just to clarify, last image I remember seeing before committee showed some banners as well. Is that still, because it says here 220,000 was approved and the capital budget, the same amount is being recommended. Does that include maintaining the banners?
So through you, Chair, no, we actually didn't go back to the banners. We didn't hear from council at the time of the last meeting that that was desirable. We thought that that was actually not desirable, so we didn't include them in this project. We focused on the soft treatment and allowing for some plantings there. But we could take another look at it if council's still interested in seeing banners there.
Well, the recommendation really doesn't set out whether banners are positive or negative. It just really sets out whether the garden areas can be managed effectively with less risk to the staff, and that was always a concern to even the last council as well. Driving down, I think the Parkway, when it was built obviously as a diversion, but it's just gotten busier and busier because our community has gotten busier and busier, and there's a lot more homes in that area and a lot more people from outside of town really using that as a main thoroughfare down to Sunset Point. Sometimes ultimately just stopping at Sunset Point and not going into the community whatsoever and just turning around. So I don't know at this level, looking at the clerk, if that could be something that could be added. It's not a negative aspect, it's just to look at it. So
If I could, Chair, if you leave it with us, indicating that if committee sort of by nods is in favor of it, we'll add that into the project. So the 220,000 was essentially a placeholder because we haven't completed a design. We haven't identified plant material. We have to do some work to get to a final design. And the 220 was based on the same number that it would have cost to pave the whole thing. So there may be some flexibility in there. And again, we're not asking for approval of budget today. That will happen through the budget process. So if I'm getting a sense from the committee that that's a desirable feature, we can look at the cost of banners and even itemize it out at time of budget and say, you know, this is how much it would cost to add budgets to this project. This is what we believe the cost of the renovation would be.
So that being said, I would suggest that you just look at every aspect, whether that be banners and or other aspects, because you're not coming asking us for money right now. You're not doing any of that. This is just a learning session for us.
This essentially is to bring you up to speed so that when you see the asking in budget time, you understand where it's coming from. But definitely we can revisit the
Excellent.
banners and how that works.
Thank you. Any other questions or?
No, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Director Culver. That was great. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod? All right, thank you very much. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. 7.4, PRC 2019-17 Fisher Field House Project revised.
Through your
Councillor.
updated. Yep.
Director Culver.
So people are familiar with the Fisher Fieldhouse project. We had some concerns at previous council meeting that there was not enough public engagement, so we conducted an open house. We got some good feedback, which was included in the report, that helped us to sort of understand what all the extended needs or desires are for this space. But at the same time, as we were approaching the open house, we became aware of a fund that's upper tier funded municipal and provincial level. And so we figure that the right strategy here is to come forward with a very basic phase 1 building with the upper tier funding, if we're successful, funding the phase 2 addition to the building. We've reached out to the administrators of the ICIP fund, and they've let us know that our contribution, our understanding of that whole package, our funding would be acceptable as the co-funded share. So essentially, regardless of how this turns out, we would end up with washrooms, a couple of change rooms, and a referee room. If we get the upper tier funding, we get to go to the extended uses, which not only speak to current needs, but extended long-term needs as well.
Anyone from the public like to speak to this? Seeing none, the recommendation is that staff report PRC 2019-17 be received and the council authorize a strategy for the project completion as indicated in this report. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor McLeod, second by Councillor Berman. Questions or comments? Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Director Culver. It's our favorite subject. Okay, so I think it would be really helpful, since we do know we have heightened public interest in this, is to be able to explain it in a grocery cart stop. What's the latest with Fisher Fields? When's it going to happen? It sounds like, perceiving almost as a downgrade, you say a very basic facility, but with a grander one on the horizon. But the budget has stayed the same. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we're looking at how many washrooms?
Four in phase 1.
Okay.
4 gender neutral washrooms in phase 1.
Mhm.
In complete, with phase 1 and phase 2 completed, I believe there are 7 off the top of my head. It's in the report, but I can't remember.
I think it's maybe mentioned 5 more.
Like 5 more, so 9 would be the answer then.
So when our residents ask, because perhaps you found the same, and I think we see it recording the feedback, not enough washrooms, do we tell them it's because we don't have the budget for, like, are there more washrooms called for at the field and we simply can't afford them? Or are we adding more in phase 2 because the public has asked for them?
Through you, Chair, a little of both. So we did hear at the open house more, but everybody that I talked to struggled with what's the number and how should they be arranged, and so we can't quantify more. We had to come up with a number. So we've used a building standard to come to 4. There are 3 porta-johns on site right now, currently in the summer. These will be 4 unisex restrooms in the shorter term. The second part of your question, I think that I can answer, is we also understand that there's growth and there's needs in the future, and that's one of the things we've always tried to accomplish with any project that we do is not just worry about what's happening today, but what could happen 30 years from now, for example, or 10 years from now. So the additional washrooms would be addressing growth. They would be addressing the more comment that we got from the open house. And so, yeah, it would be a kind of a win-win situation if we're successful with the grant. But in the shorter term, it's being addressed with a number that's drawn from a building standard. It's somewhat applicable because soccer fields don't actually have a building standard, but it is somewhat applicable. And it gets us some basic needs that replace and improve upon what's currently there. And then in the future, as growth happens, if we weren't successful, we would be building onto the building site at some point down the road when funding's available.
Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Director. That was a really thorough answer. I have another question, please. So in terms of our decision tonight and its impact on timeline, I believe that when we last had initial discussion at budget time for Fisher, there was, the goal was to break ground this year. We'd see some movement, physical breaking of ground, maybe some servicing in this calendar year. So how does this, I guess the first question is, has any of that happened? Has any of this project commenced beyond design?
no, there's been no commencing of the project. However, we still plan to hit the winter tendering period to try to receive favorable rates. That's always been our goal, bar none. We still, subject to council's approval of budget, of course. And then again, based on contractor schedules, look to break ground in the spring and as soon as possible and get the project built. It's mutually exclusive from our other two major builds, so there's nothing that stops us from doing them simultaneously other than availability of contractors and appropriate funding from, through the budget process.
So there's no negative impact on timeline based on council's decision tonight with phase one of Riverworks plan?
No, there's no negatives, or through you, Chair, there's no negative, connection to council's decisions. I mean, I think what's fair to say throughout this is that we understand that we're trying to make the best possible project. We're trying to meet all of the stakeholder needs. We're doing everything we can, council and staff. So, this process has taken as long as it needed to get us to this point. And from this point forward, we move to the next step, which is, we get tender documents ready, council approve budgets if that's what it sees fit to do within the, the entire budget complex. And then we move to tender and we start building this thing as quickly as it's possible to do. It's not, there's no negative anything. It's just more information that helps us to get to the outcome that everybody's looking for, which is the best possible facility at the right price for the community.
Okay, so without through you, Mr. Chair, without using the word negative, it would be reasonable to present to the stakeholders and the interested member of the public and the soccer club that's putting up to $100,000 towards this project to feel an assurance that this is moving forward,
Right.
pending council's ongoing approval, and that they, looking ahead to next calendar year, that they could anticipate. And we don't have that visual, but that first drawing is what I'm remembering, the last rendering we saw.
So through you, Chair, it's been adjusted because, again, there were things that came out of it, like, for example, the referee's room and the size of it was a big concern. There were other modifications that came out, but there is a phase one, like I say, contains 4 gender-neutral washrooms, 2 change rooms versus the 4, and a referee's room that's sort of moderate in size to address that concern. That gets us sort of basic amenities in phase one, and then phase two is where more community involvement can be seen. We can start talking about things like rugby moving out there. We could start talking about things like year-round uses that have always sort of been a part of this process, but we haven't been able to sort of address them in phase one, in neither case, neither before the open house or now. So those are things that we can now begin to look at with the upper tier funding, but there's no steps backwards as a result of any of the stuff that's gone on so far.
Thank you, and through Mr. Chair, because we're on a thread here, just to continue it. So the donation of up to $100,000, a contribution from the soccer club, will go towards phase one. They haven't, or the assumption is they're okie dokie with that design.
The assumption to date is that they're okay with contribution and the commitment so far. Yeah, there's been no conversations otherwise, and so our funding envelope of $911,000 in 2020 will be presented to council, including the donation amount.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for those answers, and thank you for everything you've done to engage the public and work with the stakeholders and the architect. It's a really exciting project, and everyone's going to look forward to flushing a toilet and washing their hands. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I can appreciate your comments, Councillor Comey, and I think by the Parks and Rec and Culture Department going back out on October 3rd and giving the people more say, and it's really going to be implemented into a fantastic opportunity for them to be proud of the investment that they're going to make, as well as the other 24,000 people in Collingwood that are making this investment as well that might not be out there partaking in it, but it's great for our community, it's great for our kids, and it's just another feather in their cap of being the best community in Ontario. But saying that, I'll stop my pitch on Collingwood because we obviously all love it. Councillor McLeod.
Yes, I have a couple of questions,
Yes.
please, for Director Culver. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to sort of be sure I have a firm grasp on the figures that are being discussed in this report. So it's a $911,000 building, but it is not actually the building that is costing $911,000. Could you talk to me a little bit about the percentage of those dollars that will be used to bring the water and the wastewater to the site? Because it strikes me that this is a pretty modest building for $900,000.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, the site servicing, the servicing of this building is actually pretty extensive, and you mentioned wastewater. There is actually no wastewater coming in, but we have to build a septic bed to accommodate the washrooms that will be added in both phases, actually. A fire hydrant, for example, we have no water to feed. We don't have a sufficient water capacity to feed a fire hydrant, so we're going to be using something that's often used in a rural environment. It's a dry hydrant. It's got a reservoir, and it holds water, and then if needed, the fire department can pump out that water, and we deal with it on an annual basis, checking to make sure that it's not blocked and all that. There's a lot of specifics that go into this building, given where it is in proximity to services and where it is on the property. Yeah, so that eats up a pretty large amount of the funding that's required to do the building. And it's still 4 washrooms, which that's not cheap to do. It has to meet certain code requirements and et cetera. So I think I'm hopefully giving you a sense of your question. I'm not answering it explicitly, but it's a significant amount of that $911,000 is set for servicing.
If you were to give a ballpark, like 50, 48,
I would say somewhere between 40 and 50.
is the servicing.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the money is already extant, and we're not adding to anybody's tax bill to do this. This is DC money. This is reserve money.
Correct. So it's funded 90% from DCs. The donation is included in the overall budget envelope as well. And then there is something called a non-DC reserve, which is fed through funded through taxes annually in order to have that reserve available. So that part is, but it's 10% of the project budget.
Thank you. And the second half is contingent only on us getting this extra money from upper tier levels of government.
Yeah, through you, Chair, that's correct. And Jennifer Parker, our coordinator of community wellbeing and inclusion, is sort of spearheading the application. And we're looking at it through the lens of inclusion. How do we bring more members of the community to a facility? Because maxing out facility use actually creates an efficiency. It's rather than building 2 buildings, you do 1 that more people use. So there's a list of organizations that she's been talking to, and that actually is a part of the grant application as well. It's something that's desirable in the application. So I feel like we have a reasonable chance at this one.
Last question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I just want to make comment to, at least your last comment of build 1 building rather than 2 to get people there. That was a good comment. Thank you. Go ahead with your last question.
This council approved $250,000 in the 2019 budget for this project. How much of that money has been spent so far?
On Fisher Field, I think we're about $48,000 spent on all of the site analysis and architecture.
Thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Culver, I just want to thank you for the time and effort you put into this project for 4 bathrooms. I think it is warranted, no more than 4 at this point. I think that if we were to ask the vast majority in the community, they'd probably like to see 4 bathrooms at the harbor. There are so many other places in this community that are underserved, and the balancing act that you have put forward in the last, I don't know, 6 to whatever number of months, in working with the various stakeholders, the number of public consultations that you've gone through, et cetera, is greatly appreciated for 4 bathrooms. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Comey?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for giving me another opportunity. I think I'm just going to touch on what the Deputy Mayor said and maybe drive home something that might be key to people. I think we've mentioned it time and again, but I believe that just through Collingwood United, the football club, soccer club, they comprise 800 house league players. They're the largest sports club in the area, and they're celebrating 30 years. So I think the attempt here wasn't just to bring hygienic facilities to a well-used field, but to look at opportunities for other stakeholders like potentially, I think, the rugby club, and your second phase looks at much broader uses for the area in general. So I think it's important to contextualize it beyond just the washroom, which I tend to bring up a lot, but it's actually a really, Fisher Field itself is one of our largest park areas, or maybe you could talk a little bit about it to contextualize it so we don't end up in a hole where we think we're talking just about 4 toilets. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think we have another thing coming up. I think we all realize that there's washrooms needed all over our community. And this has been an ask, and we've gone through it. We've had lots of public consultation, lots of time for people to have their say, and tonight we are voting to move this forward to get a shovel in the ground. So,
Mr. Chair, I'm not going to let that go though. As somebody who's been in the community for 20 years, who has 2 boys who have played for the United Soccer Club, who has coached, who has sponsored, I understand and appreciate the importance of this park. But I also understand and appreciate the budget and the cost as it relates to 4 bathrooms and the needs across the community as a whole. So I'm appreciative of this going forward. I'm simply recognizing that, quite frankly, of the number of projects that we have been discussing within Parks, Recreation and Culture over the number of years, this is going back to my previous experiences on council. I can't recall a time where a director has spent as much time dealing with 4 bathrooms as it relates to the various groups. And so I'm simply conveying my appreciation to the director for the amount of time and effort that he has put into the project.
okay, so as the chair, I will say that I did not mean any disrespect, nor did I show any. Thank you, and I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. 7.5, PRC 2019 Sunset Point Playground Update.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So this, we're excited to get to this place in the Sunset Point Park playground rebuild. It also feels like it's been a long time coming, but again, we're super excited about all of the consultation that was accomplished and all of the inputs that are leading to the design, the spatial design that's in front of you. The report goes into some details about sort of how we went from, we went from you know, the starting point through the survey, which was a bit of a direction setting exercise, through consultation with hundreds of youth, consultation with the Children's Treatment Network. Finally, we have secured and acquired a playground designer that we're excited to work with, and their design studio to develop some specific features that are unique to Collingwood. I think there's been lots of creativity engaged in this. I give credit to Dave Wood and Vision Tatum for their role in developing this layout. Once we have some feature designs from the designer that we've secured, we'll be excited to show those too. The early conversations have been thrilling, to say the least. So really that's, this was a report that was done. Again, we're not asking for budget approval at this point. That has to happen through the budget process. But this was to give an idea of where we're at right now, and sort of share with you the layout that was resulting from the engagement, and again give you some sort of imagery that would help you to understand what we're thinking and which direction the designs might go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone from the public wish to speak to this report? Mr. Powell, come on up.
Through you, to Dean. I attended the meeting where we discussed, or we all were together talking about what we saw at the park, and I've had, I guess it's now 5 grandkids have all enjoyed it, and I know that Keith, you were there and were responsible for getting us some speed bumps, which are not there anymore. But they would be helpful if they were put back. But the thing I saw in the thing was the actual pavilion area is being used by others. You can rent it out and so forth. It needs to have proper wash-up facilities and so forth. And when my kids are there, they take their lunch there, and when they're doing the bicycle camp. And they need to have a place to wash their hands and so forth. Now the washrooms, I understand, are there, but you also need an area to wash up, dishes and things like that. And I didn't see it in here, and I think you should make a point of doing that. But speed's still a big issue along the St. Lawrence. They've actually gone around the corner and ended up on my front lawn, okay? Cost $1,500 to put back trees and things like that they plowed into. That was last year. So traffic is a concern, and the other issue of them is to try to get the washrooms in there for sure, because the kids can't, in order for the kids to go to the washrooms, they have to cross the street. In order for them to cross the street, they have to bring an instructor out to take them across. So to me, it's obvious. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Culver?
So through you, Chair, so washrooms are included in this, but under a separate budget, so that needs to be clear.
Yeah.
We have a development charge that identifies washrooms at the pavilion as being available for expense through DC. So we're planning to do that. There is a kitchen within the pavilion, and potentially I could see us looking at other sources of funding to help enhance those types of opportunities, but it's not, the kitchen itself is not part of this project, but it's something that I can see us looking at Rotary clubs or whatnot to help us make improvements there.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Mr. McGarrett?
Sorry. Oh.
Through you, Chair, once again, thank you, Director, for the nice to see progress being made on the Enviro Park. One question I had was looking at the schematic that you provided, with the ABCD, various features proposed for the Enviro Park. And I recognize it's not a to-scale drawing, but there is, to my eye, a great deal of unutilized and underutilized land in fact, to the east, the south, and sort of southwest of the existing Enviro Park. And I wonder if you'd given any thought in your design directive to repurposing some of that. Thank you.
Director Culver?
Through you, Chair. So there is some parts of it. So we did not spread the park to make it larger, and there's one very blunt reason why is it's affordability. Creating more safety surfacing, creating more pathways for accessibility, buying more features is all very expensive, and we're already going to be challenged on this budget. So, but there are places that we have expanded use of the space. The Firefly Forest, or I think we call it Firefly Forest here, illuminated forest, the idea is to actually integrate that into the design, and where it was sort of understood to be a big value in the park, we're looking to activate it. We're looking to actually draw kids in and have them be as part of it and engage with the place. The banquet pavilion, or the harvest pavilion, is something that Raymond Smith have generously donated, but it also creates another active feature that's not currently part of the array of activity there. The multi-games court actually is reusing sand court beach volleyball facility that's sort of embedded in the forest a little bit. It's not used right now for anything, so we're going to be expanding a little bit that way to solve that need. That actually came straight out of consultation, but granted, we didn't kind of go whole hog because we didn't have the budget to do that, is sort of the short answer. The other thing is that there is a logic and symmetry and continuity to this flow in this park that allows us to have parents who can look at one space and another space and keep monitoring their kids, as well as, we have a teen tween area where kids will feel like they're separated enough from their parents to be able to have fun, but without sort of, being a risk. So there was a lot of thought into how we could sort of get as much into the play space as possible, but there are some extensions beyond what is, currently there.
I think there's a lot there. Any other questions or comments from the public? Seeing none. Staff recommendation is that staff report PRC 2019-18 be received and the council authorize the strategy for project completion as indicated in this report. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Comey, seconded by Councillor McLeod. Any questions or comments? Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Director Culver. How many weddings a year are you anticipating happening in the Firefly Florist? Because I think I want to renew my vows in there. It looks adorable.
Through you, Chair, I have no idea how many we would book in there, but we definitely are excited about the idea of this harvest table and pavilion being embedded within an illuminated forest. It's when the idea came up and when we began to chase this idea, I've looked at lots of examples online and some of them are just, there's just something really magical about them, and so I'm really excited to see that come to fruition.
On a more serious note, part of the pictures that are provided with this report show hammocks and so on. Are you anticipating that there will have to be extra security costs in case those get used overnight as well?
Are you saying that people might spend more reflective time in the reflective space?
There might be some reflections.
There might be some reflections.
Submarine races is where I'm going with that.
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure how to answer that. The hammocks will be of a commercial grade, so for safety and security reasons. How they're used, I think, is up to the park user.
Okay, thank you. I'm just wondering whether that had come up as a discussion point in the design process.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So all of our features will be designed for their ability to withstand commercial application and municipal use. That's the standard for us. We can't do less than that.
Thank you. And one more, Mr. Chair, regarding money. As with the last presentation, I was wondering if we could just be absolutely clear where we're standing on this and where the money is theoretically coming from. We're thinking about $259,000 for loos or for bathrooms in this pavilion. Is that included in the $800,000 that is being budgeted for this project, or is that $259,000 in addition? I just want to be really clear in my head.
Through you, Chair, that's an addition. So that's another development charge ask that we'll be making through the budget process at budget time.
And that money is existing in the development charge fund.
Charges.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Comey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'd like to echo all committee sentiments. I know that all the hard work that's been put forth on this. I did have the pleasure of attending one of the public input sessions, and again, a huge thank you to you and Dave Wood for hosting it. It was absolutely phenomenal, those sessions. And of course, Ms. Parker for her tireless work engaging with kids, which isn't always so easy. I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, if I can ask, can the really beautiful attachment received of the playground be put up on the screen, and perhaps Director Culver could do what he did for Councillor McLeod and just walk us through the various elements? Because what I like to call it the grocery cart stop. I think we can all agree there was a lot of input about some water feature up in this park.
So this is my error. I think Adam's going to save my life here by helping me put up the schematic. But it's absolutely my fault that it wasn't available easily on screen, and I'll see if Adam's able to do that.
No pressure, Adam.
I will speak to the water play feature. So the survey, like I say, was a direction setting instrument. It was a way for us to kind of get a sense, like, the report says we were looking at, we kind of had an instinct that the park had a special place. There he is, the superhero. The park has a special place in the community's heart, so we kind of instinctively knew that, but we didn't know sort of how that would manifest or what direction we should take the design process and the consultation process. So the survey was an instrument that helped us stop the weather vane spinning at 360 degrees and narrow it down to a quadrant. We deliberately put in a question about a water play feature, and the reality was that through all the dialogue we had, we knew that people were talking about water parks and water parks and water parks, and there was this assumption that Sunset Point was the natural location for this. And the reality is, the waterfront master plan back in 2016 identified that it was not. And for all the reasons that we're experiencing now that George had reflected on, that adding something of that mass would A, consume any budget for that play experience, and B, would attract more people and compound already existing issues, and that's not what we wanted to do. The master plan actually talked about putting it down in Harborview to start extending the traffic. But we knew that dialogue had been out there, so we put the question out with the idea of saying, one, the question was actually very specific. It said, do you, recognizing that there is a splash pad going in at Harborview Park, would you still like to see and strongly people said yes. It was strongly misunderstood. There was a lot of people that said yes, put the splash pad there, not understanding all the background work that had gone into that, which is fine and makes sense in a broad survey where people are clicking boxes. But it did tell us that a water feature was a desirable element. So we're currently working on a couple of concepts. Water play can be done through small events, small things that can happen that don't require significant drainage, for example. Putting like a spray pad in there requires us to build a whole separate set of infrastructure that is very costly and will compromise our ability to do the rest of the park within that budget. But we can do things like misting, we can do things like a little stream rivulet where it recycles, we can do things like one of our favorites that came out of the consultation that I think we're eager to try and chase is using water to make mud. Reusing some of our sand. It's a really fulfilling play experience for a young person to stick your hands into wet sand and play and build things. And so we're looking at that as being sort of the answer to the water feature or the water play element within the park. Certainly it's not going to be anywhere close to what we're doing at Harborview, but that belongs where it belongs for a certain reason. And we're definitely just acknowledging that water was desirable, so we'll figure out a way to integrate some part into the park.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think that the public will be pleased to hear that you've heard through that input and that this committee is hearing that you are looking to add that as a feature. So that's exciting. I think the issue of the washroom we've heard from Mr. Powell this evening and over again, the safety issue with regard to the volume of children and campers that use this park, and the fact that they have to go across, an unmarked, impromptu crossing to get to the other side. That something has to be done to address this, including the notion that often parents have, or guardians, or whoever have more than one child with them, and how they kind of deal with one crossing the road. So I'm glad to see that it's under consideration to add a washroom here, at minimum for safety concerns. So again, thank you so much. It's a beautiful design.
Any other questions or comments? I have some. The $259,350 for washrooms, how many washrooms is that going to give us?
We're shooting for 2. I will say that that's the amount that was indicated in the DC study. So we're using that number based on the DC study, but we haven't completed the design or procurement process for washrooms, and there's a chance that is an overestimation for what will be required for them.
Okay, and 2, this is a beautiful design. Parking. This is going to drive a lot more people down there. Probably start to drive a lot of the locals back there. Are we anticipating more parking being added in maybe some of the underused areas? I don't want to pave over greenery, but we all know that the parking is an issue down there.
So through you, Chair, I think the way I can answer that is that staff are taking a hard look at the parking conditions in Sunset Point. We did some moves this summer to try and understand what the effects of formalizing parking would be. We've learned a lot. We've done, studies of volume studies to figure that out. We're looking at other municipalities and how they're managing parking in anything approaching a similar condition. Sunset Point is very unique. It's unique because the neighborhood is embedded within the park, and so any impact on parking has a potentially has an offshoot impact to the Sunset Point residents, and we want to be very conscious of that, and we want to be very sensitive to that. We've had at least two interdepartmental meetings where we've had bylaw, planning, public works and engineering, and my department president to try and figure out, as well as clerk, sorry, as well as clerks, to talk about how do we create, is there a way to create parking conditions there that allow for better structure to maximize the opportunity of parking there. I'm not ready to present a report on that today, but I hope it's enough to know that staff have seen what happened last Civic Long weekend. I was out there myself during the mayhem. I was the one that was calling the OPP to try and get some order. So at the end of the day, we're very, very aware of it. We're very sensitive to all of the ripple effects that would happen from anything we impose there. And we're trying to come up with a game plan, and we'll present that to council.
Awesome, thank you very much. I'm gonna call for the vote. All the Deputy Mayor?
May I ask a follow-up question specific to the parking?
Yes.
In any of the conversations, has there been any discussion about actually reducing the number of parking spaces available down there? And if the rationale, and I'm watching in the corner of my eye, Mr. McGarry, the rationale would be just simply, many would theorize that places of destination don't have parking. People find a way to get there. And in fact, it always amazes me that, during the spring, Loblaw eliminates a third of their lot or whatever. At Christmas, various places eliminate parking, and yet people get there. We eliminate a full town lot Saturday mornings, and yet people manage to get there. So there is some rationale behind the fact that increasing is not maybe necessarily the solution. It would just be, I hope that in the conversations there may be some discussion about moving people to different directions and possibly even eliminating, to Councillor Comey's points about public safety. I mean, some of those spaces, if they were eliminated along St. Lawrence in and around the crosswalk, would help in terms of public safety. So just
I can answer that in there's two parts. One is that we did eliminate, sorry through you, Chair, we did eliminate some parking this summer, and didn't see, what we saw was a better distribution of parking. So the east lot that isn't normally full was full all the time when the park was full. So that was actually a good outcome. It was one of the things we tried to do, and it worked. It did that. Some of the challenges we have is the dirt lots aren't formalized, so you now have people inventing parking spaces and sometimes taking up more space than they need. Sometimes they're doing things that are detrimental to the park site by driving on the lawns and things like that. It's not getting better, it's going to get worse. So we need to do something, and that's why, like I say, this interdepartmental approach to try and figure out what we can do and come up with a conscious plan to do it. I'm going to flip, you mentioned what about eliminating parking. I think this actually helps to answer the chair's question as well, is that if we added parking, it would get used, and there would never be enough parking. It's a super desirable park. It's one of the reasons why people like living there. It's one of the reasons why it's full on the long weekends. There would never be enough parking. When that thing is full, it would always be a problem. So it kind of answers, it's the same, it's in line with what you're saying. If we eliminate parking, you're right, people will find a way to get there. The challenge for us is, what do they do to get there? And if they start infiltrating the neighborhood and parking on people's front lawns, or blocking driveways, or doing all those things that we're worried they might do if we start to, for example, put a paid parking condition at the point in the parking lots. We just want to make sure that we're managing things and that we're doing things consciously, so that if we eliminate parking, that people who come to invent parking spaces aren't doing it in a way that adversely affects the public. So that's, I hope, answers your question and gives you some comfort.
through you,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, it does answer the question, and I appreciate the comments again, putting you on the spot. My comment would be to my colleagues and the others that aren't at the table, that it's got to be this council that gets, I was going to say something and I won't, but it's this council that really needs to take a hard look at the park as a whole, and how the balance between the community and the people who live there, the community who live elsewhere, and then our guests who are coming from outside, and really figuring out how we're going to manage it, because it's not fair to staff, it's not fair to bylaw to be sending them down to deal with this without clear direction or mandate. And I think the council needs to step up and whether we, maybe through the budget process, look at, you know, increasing budget specifically for weekend bylaw and saying, look, this is a priority, et cetera. But we do need to address it, so thank you.
So through you, Chair, without advancing the budget,
Yes, let's not advance the
yeah,
budget.
some of those concepts will be presented through the budget. The idea of increasing bylaw presence and ways that we can accomplish that without creating a budget that's unsustainable or too imposing, as well as some other conditions that, you know, are enforceable down there.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor Hall's comments are justified and to be honest, quite fantastic. A few years ago, we took away parking on the south side for safety reasons, and we have no parking signs there now. So all those parking spots were eliminated, and people have found their way. So I actually really appreciate and love your approach to take away and get people biking and walking down to it. But I will say we are the council that has to get this one right. We can't continue just to forget about our residents but not appreciate our wonderful guests within our community. We need to look at every avenue of bylaw and maybe revenue generating on the weekends when I can bike down there and not see too many people that I know or see on a day-to-day basis. But on that, thank you very much for your presentation. You've had some big ones tonight, and hopefully people watching at home can appreciate all the work that goes into this and the months and months and months and months of consultation with the public that result in maybe a 3 to 4 minute breakdown. So thank you very much. I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Next up, departmental updates. We're going to get 8.1, our communications officer, Mr. Adam Ferguson, is going to come out and tell us the communications for the third quarter. Or you just want to sit there and do it?
Yeah, our remote's not working, so I'll have to.
Okay, sit there and do it.
That's okay.
Yes.
Good evening, committee. So this is the third quarter communications and engagement update, which runs from July 2019 to September 2019. We are committed to sharing information with residents, visitors, and business owners through quality and reliable communications and engagement opportunities. We are on a transformation journey within the communications division, moving towards proactive communications planning, enhanced customer service, and a two-way dialogue with the public. Our engagement encourages members of the public to become connected to their municipal government through a variety of opportunities. And our guiding principles are to be inclusive, to be respectful, to be adaptive, to be accountable, and to be responsible. Our engagement spectrum that helps us measure or categorize what we're doing includes informing, consulting, collaborating, and empowering the public. So in quarter three, we informed the public on some major events, including the Elvis Festival, Side Launch Days, Keys to Collingwood. We also informed the public on arts and culture activities, including library and museum activities and promotions, poetry events. Our Parks and Recreation department was quite busy in the third quarter, and we shared information on recreation registration programs, skating programs, our fall and winter activity guide, and pool closures, and much more. Our operations departments were quite busy as well through the summer. We shared a lot of information on crosswalk safety, sidewalk closures, road closures. During heat waves and whatnot, we included water refill stations and cooling center notifications. On the topic of water, we shared hydrant flushing information, water meter replacement information, and our planning department shared information with the public on official plan amendments and zoning bylaw amendments and land expropriation. We also informed the public on a number of business activities, including the Economic Development Action Plan and Tech Hub North. And from a corporate perspective, we are always sharing our tenders, newsletter notification, job opportunities, board opportunities, and so on. And with regards to council and legislative services, we share our meetings and agendas and minutes with the public. We live stream the meetings. We provide highlights and some of the ongoing council initiatives like the Kilometer Challenge this summer also got some play with the public. Protective services and enforcement, we share information on fire pit safety, heat warnings, Fire Prevention Week, noise control and whatnot. And our Green or Collingwood initiatives really focused on county initiatives and tied to waste, I guess, through the summer. And we would help the county share information with the public. Consulting with the public, Dean talked about a few things this evening that we worked on through the summer, including Sunset Park Playground, engaging with youth and families on that project. Our finance department consulted the public on development charges. And we also consulted on planning initiatives, tourism initiatives, and our museum often shares surveys, and our business and economic development economic development department also shares business survey opportunities with the public. Our arts and culture department collaborated in Q3 on some arts projects like our Frozen Voyage community art project, our Placeholders Local Poets program. Our Parks and Recreation department collaborated on the Phragmites cleanup, International Walk to School Day. We had some major proclamations this summer that required some collaboration with third-party groups, such as our National Breastfeeding Week, our British Home Child Day. We had our Orange Shirt Day, which was an educational opportunity but required collaboration amongst a number of groups. Our fire department had youth and diversity training workshops, and our business department had networking opportunities and an influencer takeover of Experience Collingwood. So now to get into a few statistics about our communications channels. Engage Collingwood, engage.collingwood.ca is our engagement portal. We had 470 site visits per month in the Q3. We have a total of 208 total registrations to the site, and we engaged in the Q3 on the Economic Development Action Plan, waterfront story sharing, and we provided updates on the Urban Forest Management Plan and Sunset Point Park Playground. Our website, www.collingwood.ca, of course, was the gold winner at the .com Awards in the Q3. We're getting 33,000 visits per month, 78,000 page views per month. We provide 121 web updates to the site per month, and our most viewed pages are the homepage, human resources and employment, aquatic programs, events calendar, public transit, activity guide, trails, and our parks and facilities page. On social media, in the Q3, we've surpassed the 4,000 followers threshold on Twitter, which is a pretty big accomplishment. And we're pushing out about 114 tweets per month on that channel. On our town Facebook page, we have 2,100 likes, and we're reaching almost 2,600 people per day on our Facebook page, and we push out 116 posts per month. We have 2 town YouTube channels. The town channel gets 750 views per month, and our streamed meeting channel is getting 180 views per month. Our meetings are also streamed on Rogers TV and on the website. Our Collingwood Public Library has 1,200 followers on Twitter and is active on Facebook, and that's managed by our Library Public Relations Coordinator. Experience Collingwood is active on Facebook and Instagram. We have almost 18,000 likes on Facebook, reaching 4,000 organically every day, and almost 11,000 paid reach per day on Experience Collingwood. That number's, I would say, definitely ramped up in the Q3 because we did a lot of advertising with Side Launch Days and the Elvis Festival. And that the Experience Collingwood focuses on economic development and tourism and is managed by our Director of Business and Marketing, Martin Ridlow. We still have an active Healthy Kids channel, which is within our Wellbeing division, and there's 260 followers on Twitter there. And our Collingwood Museum Facebook page has almost 14,000 likes and reaches 430 per day. We offer a monthly e-newsletter, which includes 26 items per edition in the Q3, and in the Q3 we reached 730 subscribers. In terms of media relations, we push out 8 news releases per month, and we get 29 media requests per month. We also do daily media monitoring. And we offer the town pages in the Collingwood Connection newspaper. And we're offering 30 items per month in the third quarter, and that's managed by Krista Carter in our clerk services department. Communications is also offering communications planning, and that's something we're really hoping to ramp up a lot more. Staff and council support in the form of briefing notes and speaking notes and whatnot, print materials, graphic design, video and photography when time allows, and event support. And we also are ramping up internal communications within the organization. If anyone wants to contact communications, they can reach me at communications@collingwood.ca. And I encourage everyone to follow us on our town website, collingwood.ca. Visit Engage Collingwood at engage.collingwood.ca. Follow us on Twitter at Town Collingwood, on Facebook at Town Collingwood, and on YouTube, Town of Collingwood. And we're also ramping up customer service, and if there's any questions, inquiries, comments, or whatnot to the town in general, you can reach out to our customer service ambassadors at townhall@collingwood.ca. Town Hall phone number is 705-445-1030. And on our municipal website, collingwood.ca, you can find a contact us form and our staff directory. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Great job. Okay, next up, not on the agenda, but the mayor has asked, so we will deliver. Director Ridlow, if you can come up and just give a short update, the Economic Development Action Plan, in particular, your advisory team and the launching of Engage Collingwood, to get some ideas. Thank you very much for sitting through the meeting, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair and Councillors. Just a quick update. As you'll recall, last time I presented a plan that spans into the new year around developing the Economic Development Action Plan. Right now, we're just finalizing the advisory team members. We had some good submissions, so we're just going through the process with our strategic facilitators to make sure we check all the boxes. In terms of the survey, if you'll recall, we are going to be launching one next week that will open it up to the general community to give us some ideas and thoughts on economic development. So that's something that we'll be really following up on the initial postings we did on Engage Collingwood, which we're soliciting for different people to submit for the advisory team. So we continue to be on track. We're working closely with the strategic facilitators and the mayor to make sure we keep this moving ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business? Seeing none, thank you very much for tuning in tonight, and thank you for the people that showed up. I'm going to look for an adjournment. Councillor McLeod, all those in favor? Good night, everyone.